Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine working in the same industry for 20 years, only to be told one morning that your career is dead, gone, obsolete. That is exactly what happened to Arthur at 45 years old. But instead of giving up, he did something crazy. He went back to college. In this episode, Arthur walks into a classroom full of 19-year-olds to learn a completely new trade. Can an old-school professional survive a world of Gen Z slang, coding, and group projects with kids half his age? Let's find out.
Arthur sat at his desk, staring blankly at the cardboard box in his hands. The office around him was quiet, filled only with the low hum of copy machines and the soft rustle of packing paper. Just 20 minutes ago, his manager had called him into the corner office. The conversation was short, cold, and final. "The board is cutting the entire print division, Arthur," his manager had said, refusing to meet his eyes. "Print is a dead industry. Your skills just don't transfer to the digital side anymore. We have to let you go." Dead. The word echoed in Arthur's mind like a heavy bell. He was 45 years old. He had spent more than 2 decades perfecting his craft, managing layout designs and coordinating large-scale printing presses. He knew the touch of paper, the precise measurements of margins, and the specific smell of fresh ink. Now a younger manager was telling him that everything he knew was obsolete. It was all useless. Arthur packed his final coffee mug into the box, stood up, and took a deep breath. Walking out of the glass building into the bright afternoon sun, a sudden wave of panic hit him. He had a mortgage to pay, a family to support, and a resume that felt like a relic from a museum. He knew he couldn't just sit around and wait for a miracle. The world was moving forward at lightning speed, and he was being left behind in the dust. If his old career was truly dead, he had no choice but to find a new one. Arthur pulled out his phone, opened a web browser, and typed 2 words into the search bar: local college.
The campus parking lot was packed with modified hatchbacks and shiny electric scooters. Arthur turned off his car engine and held the steering wheel tightly, his palms sweating. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting the collar of his sensible polo shirt. He felt completely out of place before he even opened the car door. Walking toward the tech building, Arthur felt like a giant time traveler from the previous century. Every student walking past him seemed to be exactly 19 years old, wearing oversized hoodies and baggy jeans. They moved in small groups, laughing loudly, staring at their smartphones and sharing wireless earbuds. Arthur followed the signs to room 304, holding a traditional paper notebook and a black ink pen. He walked inside the classroom and stopped dead in his tracks, feeling 20 pairs of eyes lock onto him. The room was filled with sleek silver laptops and glowing dual monitors, casting a blue light on the young faces. Arthur walked awkwardly toward an empty desk in the back corner, trying to make himself look small. A young guy with a backwards baseball cap and a silver nose ring looked up from his glowing phone screen. "Hey man, are you the substitute professor?" the kid asked casually, spinning a digital stylus between his fingers. Arthur felt his face grow hot as a few students nearby giggled quietly at the question. "No, I am actually a student in this UX design class. My name is Arthur." The kid blinked in surprise, then offered a quick, casual shrug of his shoulders. "Oh, my bad, man," the kid said, turning back to his device. "I'm Leo. Welcome to the grind, I guess." The professor walked in and immediately began tapping on a massive smartboard, talking about user flows and wireframes. Arthur opened his notebook to write, but stopped when he realized everyone else was already typing at lightning speed. He stared at his blank paper, the strange new tech terms washing over him like a foreign language.
The professor clapped his hands together, the sharp sound echoing through the high-tech classroom speakers. "All right, everyone, time for your first major group project," the professor announced, pointing at the smartboard. "Look at the screen to find your assigned teams of 3. You will have 4 weeks to design a functional mobile app interface from scratch." Arthur squinted at the bright monitor, tracking down his name until his eyes stopped at the bottom list. Group 7, Arthur, Leo, and Chloe. Arthur looked across the room and saw Leo, the guy with the nose ring, waving a casual hand to get his attention. Sitting next to Leo was Chloe, a young woman with bright green hair who was rapidly typing on a purple tablet. Arthur picked up his paper notebook, walked over to their shared desk, and pulled out an empty chair. "Hi, team," Arthur said, offering a warm, professional handshake that neither of them seemed to expect. Leo gave a quick nod, while Chloe gave his hand a brief, polite shake before turning back to her screen. "Okay, so I already started a shared folder on the cloud," Chloe said, speaking at an incredibly fast pace. "I also generated a temporary Discord server for us so we can brainstorm and drop our Figma links there." Arthur blinked, feeling a familiar wave of confusion wash over him as he stared at his blank notebook page. "I understand," Arthur said slowly, trying to hide his anxiety, "but what exactly is a Discord, and how do we use Figma to build this app?" Chloe stopped typing and exchanged a quick, knowing look with Leo, who let out a small, sympathetic chuckle. "Don't worry about it, Arthur," Leo said, leaning back in his chair and spinning his digital stylus. "Figma is just the design software we use to make the app look real, and Discord is where we talk." "Right, but we need to move fast because this project is going to be a total grind," Chloe added, adjusting her glasses. "We need to wireframe the user journey by Friday, or we're going to fall way behind the curve." Arthur nodded his head, pretending to follow along, while writing down the words Figma and wireframe in his notebook. He realized he wasn't just learning a new trade, he was learning an entirely new way to communicate with the world. Arthur sat at his kitchen table at midnight, the harsh light from his laptop screen making his tired eyes burn. Around his computer lay 3 empty coffee mugs, a half-eaten sandwich, and pages of messy handwritten notes. On the screen, a red notification flashed boldly. Quiz score 52%, failing grade. Arthur buried his face in his hands, feeling a heavy weight press down on his chest. He had spent the entire weekend studying the coding logic and digital design rules, but nothing seemed to stick in his mind. His teenage classmates effortlessly absorbed the information, while he had to read every single paragraph 4 times. To make matters worse, his teenage daughter had asked him for help with her high school math homework earlier that evening. He had been forced to tell her that he was too overwhelmed with his own homework to look at hers. The guilt of failing as a student and failing as a provider was starting to eat him alive from the inside. "What am I doing here?" Arthur whispered to the quiet, dark kitchen, his voice trembling with deep frustration. "I am 45 years old, trying to compete with kids who have been using computers since they were in diapers." An intense wave of imposter syndrome hit him, telling him that he was foolish to think he could ever reinvent his life. He looked at the digital calendar on his phone, realizing the high-stakes midterm exam was only 7 days away. If he could not pass a simple weekly quiz, he stood absolutely no chance of passing the major midterm test. He closed his laptop screen with a sharp click, seriously considering opening the college portal to officially drop out. He walked over to the window, looking out into the dark neighborhood, wondering how he would ever support his family. He felt completely burned out, trapped between a dead past and a future that felt completely impossible to reach.
The college computer lab was almost empty at 8 o'clock on a rainy Thursday evening. Arthur sat in the back row, staring intensely at his design layout until the glowing grid lines blurred together. Every time he tried to connect the user login button to the main dashboard, the entire app interface broke. He let out a loud, heavy sigh of frustration, rubbing the back of his neck to ease the growing tension. "You're using the wrong auto layout constraints, Arthur," a voice said quietly from the row behind him. Arthur turned around in surprise to see Chloe, her bright green hair tied up in a messy bun. She was packing her tablet into her backpack, but she paused when she noticed the defeat written across his face. She walked over to his desk, leaned over his shoulder, and took hold of his computer mouse. "Look, if you click here and pin the edges to the container, it stays perfectly centered," she explained smoothly. With 3 quick clicks of the mouse, the broken design snapped into place, looking exactly the way it was supposed to. Arthur blinked in amazement, looking from the perfectly aligned screen up to his young classmate. "Wow, thank you, Chloe," Arthur said, a wave of genuine relief washing over his tired face. "I have been trying to fix that single alignment issue for the last 2 hours." Chloe shrugged her shoulders politely, leaning against the edge of the desk. "No problem, but honestly, I actually need some help from you, too, if you have a few minutes," she admitted. She pulled out her tablet and showed him a rough outline for their upcoming group presentation slides. "Leo and I know how to make the graphics look pretty, but our actual written pitch sounds totally boring," she said. Arthur smiled, looking at the messy text, immediately recognizing the structural errors from his decades in media. "The problem is you are just listing features instead of telling a compelling story," Arthur said, his confidence returning. "You need to hook the audience by showing them the exact problem your user faces before you reveal the solution." For the next hour, the 45-year-old veteran and the 19-year-old student worked side by side at the computer. Chloe taught Arthur the secret keyboard shortcuts of the design software, making his digital workflow twice as fast. In return, Arthur rewrote their pitch script, transforming their dry technical data into a powerful, engaging narrative. As they walked out of the tech building together into the cool night air, the massive generation gap began to disappear. Arthur realized that while he had a lot to learn about the new tools, his hard-earned life experience was still incredibly valuable. The mid-semester sun streamed through the large library windows, warming the wooden desk where Arthur sat. For the first time in months, he did not feel a heavy knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He was looking at a complex user flow diagram on his monitor, mapping out how data traveled through a mobile application. Suddenly, as he traced the lines with his finger, the underlying logic of the software didn't look like a foreign language anymore. It made perfect sense. The design patterns, the technical jargon, and the coding constraints all snapped together in his mind like pieces of a puzzle. "It finally clicked," Arthur whispered to himself, a wide, genuine smile spreading across his face. He spent the next 2 hours working smoothly, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he built out a new prototype. He didn't need to look up every single term in his paper notebook, and he didn't need to stop and double-check his shortcuts. Later that afternoon, during the classroom critique session, the professor displayed Arthur's individual project on the main smartboard. "Notice how clean the navigation is here," the professor told the class, pointing to the elegant layout. Arthur has done an excellent job of keeping the user journey simple, intuitive, and highly functional. Arthur looked around the room and saw Leo giving him an enthusiastic thumbs up from across the aisle. Chloe nodded her head in approval, whispering something to the student next to her while pointing at the screen. Arthur felt a deep sense of pride swell in his chest, realizing he was no longer just surviving the daily grind. He was actually understanding the material, contributing to the class, and keeping pace with students half his age. The heavy feeling of being an obsolete relic was officially gone, replaced by the exciting energy of true progress. He had successfully crossed the hardest part of the learning curve, and he was finally on the right track.
The professor stood at the front of the lecture hall, tapping a dry erase marker against his palm. "For your final project, you will not just be designing for a grade," the professor announced to the room. "You will be pitching a complete digital rebrand to real-world business owners from our local community." Arthur, Chloe, and Leo gathered around their usual corner desk, staring at the list of participating local businesses. "Most of these are trendy clothing boutiques or modern fitness apps," Chloe said, flipping through her digital tablet. "But look at this one at the bottom of the page," Arthur noted, pointing his pen at a familiar name. "Max's Diner. It's a 40-year-old traditional family restaurant on Main Street, and it is losing all its customers to corporate chains." Leo leaned forward, frowning slightly as he looked at the diner's outdated logo on his laptop screen. "Man, their current website looks like it was built in 1998, said Leo, shaking his head. "They don't even have a digital mobile ordering system or a way to view the daily specials online." "Exactly," Arthur said, his eyes lighting up with excitement as he saw a massive opportunity. "The owner is an old-school guy who thinks the digital world is a threat, just like my old bosses did. We can use our design tools to build them a sleek, accessible mobile app," Chloe suggested, her interest piqued. "We can create an online ordering workflow that keeps their classic, comfortable aesthetic but modernizes the utility." Arthur nodded aggressively, realizing this project was the perfect marriage of his past and his new future. "You two can build a beautiful, high-fidelity interface," Arthur said, mapping out the strategy on paper. "And I'll structure a business pitch that speaks the owner's language, showing him how tech can preserve his legacy." The team spent the next 3 hours brainstorming, merging cutting-edge software solutions with old-school customer service values. Arthur felt a powerful surge of confidence as they finalized their project plan for the struggling diner. He finally knew exactly how to bridge the massive gap between the physical past and the digital future. The presentation hall was packed with local business owners, professors, and nervous students adjusting their formal clothes. Arthur stood in the back corner wearing his best navy blue suit, looking completely calm and collected. Next to him, Chloe was pacing back and forth, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold her tablet. "I can't do this, Arthur," Chloe whispered, her face turning pale as the judges clapped for the previous group. "Public speaking makes me totally freeze up, and my chest feels completely tight right now." Arthur stepped in front of her, placing a gentle, reassuring hand on her shoulder to anchor her attention. "Look at me, Chloe," Arthur said, his deep voice calm, steady, and full of decades of life experience. "You know this design inside and out because you built it with your own hands. Take a deep breath. I am going to handle the introduction, and when I pass it to you, just show them how the app works." "Group 7, you are up," the professor called out, pointing toward the brightly lit center stage. Arthur walked out with total confidence, leading his young teammates up to the presentation podium. As the slide deck flashed onto the massive screen, Arthur looked directly at the elderly owner of Max's Diner. "Good morning,"
Arthur began, his voice echoing clearly through the microphone. Technology shouldn't destroy traditional businesses, it should protect them, and today we're going to show you how. He delivered a powerful, moving introduction about legacy, community, and the human side of small business. When he smoothly transitioned the talk to Chloe, her nerves vanished, replaced by the technical confidence he had sparked. She ran through the live digital demo flawlessly, while Leo handled the technical questions from the panel with ease. When they finished, the room was completely silent for a second before the diner owner stood up and started clapping. The entire hall erupted into loud applause, and Arthur knew they had absolutely knocked it out of the park. The morning sun caught the bright gold lettering on the commencement banner hanging across the college quad. Arthur stood in the center of the lawn, adjusting the heavy black fabric of his graduation gown. He looked down at his matching cap, feeling a deep, emotional swell of pride that he had never expected to feel again. "Hey, Arthur, get over here for a group photo before the line starts moving," Leo yelled loudly across the crowded grass. Leo was wearing his graduation cap backwards, his silver nose ring catching the bright morning light. Chloe was standing right next to him, her vibrant green hair contrasting beautifully against her dark blue academic robes. Arthur walked over to them, a wide, genuine smile spreading across his face as they pulled him into a tight embrace. There were no handshakes this time. They were a team, and they had crossed the finish line together. "We actually made it through the grind, man," Leo said, throwing an arm around Arthur's shoulder for the camera. "We couldn't have passed that final business panel without you anchoring the team, Arthur," Chloe added, smiling warmly. Arthur's wife and daughter pushed through the crowd of families, their eyes bright with happy tears as they approached. His daughter ran forward and hugged him tightly around the waist, holding up a handmade sign that read, "Go, Dad!" "I am so incredibly proud of you," his wife whispered, reaching up to adjust the tassel on his cap. Arthur looked around the campus lawn, watching hundreds of 19-year-olds celebrating their futures with loud cheers. He didn't feel like a giant time traveler or an awkward outsider anymore. He belonged right here among them. He had spent 20 years believing his identity was tied to a single, traditional industry that had vanished overnight. Now, holding his digital design diploma, he realized that learning had absolutely nothing to do with age. He had successfully reinvented his entire life, and he was ready for whatever came next. Arthur smoothed the front of his jacket as he sat across from the tech firm's hiring manager. The office was bright, minimalist, and decorated with colorful modern art and indoor plants. The interviewer looked down at Arthur's resume, then looked up with a curious expression on his young face. "Your portfolio is incredibly impressive, Arthur," the manager said, tapping his tablet screen with a pen. "Your user experience layouts are clean, modern, and highly functional. But I have to ask about your background in print media. Why make such a massive career shift at this point in your life?" Arthur took a deep breath, feeling completely calm, confident, and centered in his own skin. "For 20 years, my job was to make sure messages were clear, beautiful, and easy to understand," Arthur explained. "The delivery system changed from paper to pixels, but the core human need for good design remains exactly the same." He looked directly into the young manager's eyes, speaking with the steady weight of true professional authority. "My younger classmates taught me how to use the latest digital tools at lightning speed," Arthur continued smoothly. "But my decades in the workforce taught me project management, workplace communication, and how to solve real problems under pressure." The hiring manager leaned back in his ergonomic chair, a slow, impressed smile spreading across his face. That is exactly the unique perspective our senior design team is missing right now, the manager admitted honestly. He closed his tablet, stood up from his desk, and offered Arthur a firm, respectful handshake. "Welcome aboard, Arthur. Your new journey starts on Monday." Walking out of the glass building into the warm afternoon sun, Arthur let out a long, happy breath. He pulled out his phone, opened his family chat group, and typed a short message. "I got the job." His old industry was dead, but Arthur was more alive, relevant, and ready for the future than ever before. What an incredible journey for Arthur! It just goes to show that age is just a number when it comes to learning something new and changing your life. You can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. If you enjoyed this story and want to practice your English more, make sure to smash that like button right now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our upcoming educational stories. Leave a comment below using one of today's new vocabulary words or idioms to tell me what you thought. Thank you so much for watching. Keep practicing your English, and I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.